I'm going to explain how you can save audio files and save multi-track sessions. And to follow along, go get 1302 saving files, multi-track session, inside the multi-track session subfolder right there. So we're going to save a multi-track session first, and it's much different than saving an audio file. A multi-track session file, the .sesx file, is just information about this multi-track session. It is not an audio file. For instance, it has information about the track names, what files are in the tracks, volume levels, panning levels, any keyframes that you've added, any effects you've added, if you've added audio buses down here, things like that. That kind of information. If you save a multi-track session, you cannot listen to it on some other piece of software. You can only hear it here inside Audition. So when you save a multi-track session, you are not saving an audio file. In the next tutorial, I talk about mixing down a multi-track session to a file, and that's much different. When you mix down a session, you create a file, and then you can save that as an audio file that you can hear, in multiple players. So that's a big difference. So you might want to save this session. So I need to make a change, first of all. So I'll just change the volume level here for the vocal track. And then a little asterisk shows up here in the file name saying, okay, you've changed the multi-track session. You might want to save it. Notice that it's orange. If I click on bass, for example, and highlight bass and then go to File, Save, what I'm going to save is not bass, despite the fact that it's highlighted. The orange thing is what you're going to end up saving, just to be clear on that. So I'll just double click on it to make sure it's both highlighted and orange to make sure it's going to save the right thing. So if I want to save this, I go to File, and I choose between Save and Save As. If I choose Save, it's going to replace the original file. So whatever file you've got, and you've made some changes to it, that file is going to be gone, and you're going to replace it with this new version of this multi-track session file. So if you click Save Now, you will replace this original file from the Working Files folder, which is probably not a good idea, although it's not a horrible thing here. It's just this one little change that you made to it. So the best bet here is to go Save As for our purposes, just for this demonstration, clicking on that. And here are your options. But it looks like you've got, let's say 5 options here, but really you've only got kind of like 2.5 options. You can change the file name, which is fine. You can change the folder location, which is also something you might want to do. But as far as the format, you can't change that. You've got only one choice, and that's the session file. And you can't change the sample type from a multi-track session when you save it, so it's always going to stay at the original sample type that you created when you made this multi-track session. And finally, there's this little checkbox that says, do you want to include markers and other metadata? And right now, there really aren't any markers or metadata here, but if I click on that, that makes it happy and turns off that little exclamation point, so I'll do that. Now, if I click OK, since I haven't changed anything, it'll replace the original file. But anyways, I just want to show you how to do that, so I'll cancel out of that. So again, this is just a multi-track session, not an audio file. So let's go take a look at an audio file. I'm going to double click on bass. Notice that it is now orange, which means it's the thing that we're going to save if we save something now. Even if I highlight that, the bass will be the thing that we save. I need to make a change so it'll be different, so then we can save it. So I'll just go over here and make a change, like increase its volume or something. That selects the entire file when I do that. I can select part of the file, for example, and let's say like that much, and I can save a selection as well as save the entire file. But we're going to save just the entire file now, so I'll just click away. Now that I've made a change, I'll go to File, and I've got the choice again, Save or Save As. Again, if I click Save, it'll replace the original file. So do be careful if you choose that. You really need to want to replace the file if you choose Save. The most likely scenario when you're saving an audio file that you've changed is to save it with a new name. That's almost always what you want to do. You don't want to replace the original file. So I click Save As, and that opens up the Save As dialog box. And here are the options here. You can change the name, the file location, and then here's where the rubber meets the road. These 3 things here, the format, the sample type, and the format settings. So currently the format is the format that it's in, which is WAV. PCM stands for Pulse Code Modulation. That's kind of the de facto format that files are stored at, kind of deep down in the nitty-gritty as to how they're saved. So we're going to change this format to something else. Let's try an MP3, which is a pretty commonly used format. When you choose that, you can change the sample type. Right now, the sample type is 24-bit. If I click on this, I can change that by checking a default here. Let's go to 32-bit floating point, which is actually a pretty good thing to save things as because it preserves the audio quality down the road. You can change the number of channels from the original current mono to something else. And if you do want to change the bit depth, you can do it here as well instead of selecting a preset. So I click OK. So we've now changed the sample type. Now we talk about format settings, and every single format has a different collection of format settings depending on the format. With MP3, it talks about the quality of the file. So if I go here to click Change and click this drop-down list, it gives me all these various bit rates, with 192 kilobits per second being the default here. If I choose 320, that's a higher quality. If I choose variable instead of constant, then that will be even higher quality because that changes the bit rate depending on the complexity of the audio. That's a good thing if you really want to get high quality MP3. And again, you can make a selection from this drop-down list, but here it's the highest quality. It's kind of the purpose of selecting variable. And if I click OK now, it won't replace the file because it has a new file extension. So it'll add this file to the current location where I got the file from. Let's try a different format. I'm going to go to that libsend thing just to show you how that works. Click on that. It says format here. It should say something like collection of file types, really. You can change the sample type again, so go to change and you can take a preset. And the presets are all the same. It doesn't make a difference which format you select. There's always going to be these presets here, but in the end, they may not work. You may get overridden by the format that you choose, particularly when you work inside the libsend file library, because some of these formats, some of these file types will not work as high as 32-bit. They're maxing out at 24-bit, just to be aware of that. So now when you go down to format settings, usually you've got a file type already selected, and the format is specific for that file. But here, the format setting really is which file type do I want to work with. So I click Change, and I click this Format drop-down list, and you get all these different file types, really. So we'll try Sound Designer 2 audio file and see what that's like. Now you have more options. This is now the encoding and byte order, which is a little confusing. The encoding says, how deep do you want to go in terms of how many bits do you want? Notice that it doesn't go to 32. But this byte order is something that relates to the kind of processor you have, or processor that the people listen to your audio will have. And it refers to whether you have a PowerPC or an Intel processor. And so the only choice here is a PowerPC. It's called endianness, E-N-D-I-N, endianness. You can do big or little. If you have big endian, then that refers to a PowerPC. If you have little endian, that refers to Intel. So just be aware that these guys are pretty specific to platforms and to programs. So be aware that if you're going to work with these guys, then you probably have to have the appropriate software and hardware to make these guys work right. Let's pick a different one. Go to Change. We'll go down and we'll select the Sun Next AU format. And this time we have a little different choice. A lot more choices here. Even 64-bit floating point, which is super high quality, but we'll take 32. And then the default byte order. Here we have both endian types, so just take the default byte order here. This is a little bit more universal than the one we looked at a moment ago. I'll click Cancel. So that's how the libsend or libsnd file system works. Change the format to something else. We'll try the Monkeys Audio. Monkeys Audio is a lossless compression format. Monkeys Audio format doesn't work at 32-bit, so if I were to save this, it'll automatically keep it at 24 bits. Just be aware if that's how Monkeys Audio works. We'll try FLAC, which is also a lossless compression format. And with FLAC, you'll notice there's no asterisk, but it saves at 16-bit. So again, it's lossless, but in fact, this is going to down convert your samples to 16-bit from 24. So there are some limitations when you work with these lossless file formats. And now we'll take a look at the two uncompressed lossless formats. There's AIFF. It's pretty straightforward. You can just pick your sample type and your format settings, which have minimal choices there. And under Wave, same thing. Let's go to the Wave PCM pulse code modulation, and we'll just take a look at it. We can change the sample type again if we want to take the drop-down list here and go to 32-bit floating point. That's good. And we'll go on to format settings. Not too many options here. There are some older Audition formats that you don't need to worry about unless you've got an old version of Audition, so we'll just take that. And then as far as the RF64 format, that says 4 gigabyte plus support. One of the limitations of WAV files is that you can't have files that are larger than 4 gigabytes. At least you couldn't. Now you can if you choose the RF64 format, which is the default thing, which you should choose anyway. So that's the basic process of saving a multi-track session as a session file and an audio file in one of the many formats that are available here inside Audition.